Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of GTM in the Tofu Bowl. My guest today is Ashley Faus. She is the head of Lifecycle Marketing for portfolio at Atlassian. She also is an author. She does a ton of other things. She's very prolific. So thank you for joining me today, Ashley.
Yeah, this will be fun.
So you wrote a book. I'm also both impressed with a full-time role. Why did you decide you wanted to write a book? And also, I'm also very curious on what goes into getting people to actually buy your book.
Yeah. I recently posted on LinkedIn that writing the book was not the hardest part. It's like because all I had to do was write. And I think a lot of people, I get this question pretty frequently of like, man, how did you do it with a full-time role? And I'm like, well, I didn't write the book in this short amount of time. I wrestled with the problem. I had done all the research. I've codified a lot of it. And so all I had to do was write. Um, and I think in terms of why I wrote it, it was mostly to be able to expand on a lot of the stuff that I talk about in presentations and on podcasts and on LinkedIn, to really help people actually take action on that, not just think about it from a theory perspective. And then in terms of actually getting people to buy it, I am in the thick of the reminders that, most people don't see your content. If they see it, they don't remember. If they do remember, they don't take action, right? So it's like, yes, all of those get the attention, get into the headspace, drive the action. It's definitely a different ball game when you're doing it for kind of your own personal stuff versus for a brand that maybe has broader reach and budget to help drive more of that attention and action.
Though I bet you're going to learn some really important lessons by doing this so scrappily that you can apply to a large company with big budgets and more attention. There's always things that people forget when they have a lot of resources that can actually move the needle pretty substantially. So I feel like you'll have some good takeaways from that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's also good. I mean, it's funny. So, some of the challenges that you don't think of, the book is titled Human-Centered Marketing. And so I'm trying to kind of combine that human touch with a lot of the technology and, resources and that kind of thing. And so even figuring out like stickers to be able to sign and ship to people who bought the book but didn't, get it signed. That's one of the pre-order bonuses that I'm offering. And it's like, okay, how do we get high quality stickers, but in a quantity that's not 10,000? Like, I don't need 10,000 stickers. I need like 50. I need 100, right? And so how do you
Maybe you'll sell
afford
10,000
that?
books.
Like, I mean, yes, whether I need to actually sign 10,000 books, well, stickers worth of books is a separate issue, right? Like, but it's definitely different. Again, it's a lot easier to find a vendor to do that for you if you're willing to buy 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 versus trying to find someone that can do it at a reasonable cost for only 50 to 100 or less than a quantity of 1,000. So there's the fun things like that from a sourcing perspective where you're like, someone has to do this. Like for small businesses, especially, I have a lot of empathy for them now with their packaging or stickers or shipping and those kinds of things where they don't get the volume breaks.
Why margins are low for SMB in general, right? Also, I
Yeah.
saw you posting that, again, we'll talk about like human and AI and like how do you keep the humanity there? But I saw you posting about how there's certain things that AI can't do, technology can't do, like signing. And I was like, when I was on the VC side, I looked at three companies that were the AI, or not AI, handwriting robots. So they're actually
Yes.
robots who could be trained on your handwriting, and it is unbelievably impressive. It is
Interesting.
indistinguishable from a human because it is actually writing it. So it's
Yeah.
not like printed on a paper, it's literally written, but it's written with a robot.
Interesting. So one thing, I think I took a picture and I was basically going to say like the authenticity versus legibility because as I go, my signature gets worse and worse. And so if I sit down and I focus and I'm like, I will write my name very nicely to where you can actually read it. And it's like, listen, do you people want me to actually sign this or do you want to be able to read it? Because those are actually two different things in many cases. So maybe the robots are just like doing like this.
They're very consistent. I will tell you
Yeah.
that. The robots are quite consistent.
Yeah.
Also, you said something at the very beginning, which I think was such an important point around just writing the book was the easy part. It's the promotion, getting people to buy it. That is literally an analogy for marketing at a B2B company.
Yeah.
People think that by building an amazing product, it's going to sell itself. And that is never the reality. That is the entire reason why marketing and sales exist, is because building a great product is not anything if you can't go and get distribution for it. So I feel like
Yeah.
there's a good parallel there.
Oh, for sure. Well, I mean, that's like the whole myth of PLG, right? Like product-led growth. Oh, the product just sells itself. And I'm like, that's not what that acronym means. I think the other piece of this that a lot of people forget is that marketing actually influences what you build. When you talk about building a great product, what are the inputs to know that it is great? And I don't know, I think it was on the show Silicon Valley where the like Pied Piper and all the engineers got together and they were like building all of this stuff and they told people about the concept and everyone was like, yes, we get it, let's do it. But then the user experience was poor, or like the way they solved the problem only worked for a portion of the cohort they were trying to reach. And so the monthly active users and like the purchase numbers were terrible and they just couldn't figure out. They're like, but everybody said they wanted it. And it's like, yes, well, marketers also influence how you build the product. Like, does the problem exist? What are the alternative solutions? Why is your solution differentiated? How do you articulate the differentiation in that solution? Like, there's all of this stuff to it beyond just the promotion piece that happens in finding product market fit, in finding problem solution fit, right? Like, there's so many intricate things in there. And I think, yeah, it is a little funny when people, especially when PLG was kind of new and everyone was like, oh yeah, the product just sells itself. That's not what happens.
The best PLG companies are dumping money into marketing. They probably have bigger marketing budgets than sales-led teams.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
acquisition is via digital, 100% digital.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing that's funny too, so there's the concept of using marketing to really understand what is the cost of doing nothing, what are the other alternatives, what is our differentiation. But I also think that the best marketing teams, they ask and then they watch, because what people say and what people do tend to also not be the same. And one of my favorite stories is with Netflix when they were launching their recommendations algorithm. Originally, they had a little quiz at the beginning where you onboarded and you took this quiz, and people were so aspirational. People were like, I love documentaries and I love like film noir. And then come Friday and Saturday night, people were watching rom-coms, like your sitcoms, all that. So they stopped asking people and they started watching, and all of a sudden the recommendations got so much better. And I feel like marketing teams sometimes don't do that as much as they should, of actually watching and then pairing that with what they hear.
Yeah, it's so funny. I talk about it when I watch TV of like, I'm going to go let my brain rot. And people are like, that's a rude way to say it. Like, you're not rotting your brain. And I'm like, no, I am. And that's what I'm intending to do. My goal is to veg out, zone out, not have to think, not be so engaged. That's what I'm doing. I am achieving my goal. Like, I am actually succeeding, right? So that is funny though about the aspirations. And I think it's the same thing with products as well. People have these grand visions of like, here's how I think my marketing team should work or my engineering team should work this way. So we're gonna build the products and we're gonna, say that we use the products in this way. And it's like, okay, but what actually happens? And what you might think is an outlier use case is not. Or I hear this a lot too of like, well, they're using it wrong. I mean, that's fine. You can say that the user is using the product wrong, but like, if that's how they're using the product and you're finding that a lot of your users are using the product that way, maybe that's what the product is used for. Like, that's fine that
Yes.
maybe you're aspirational in what you think the product should be used for when you actually watch your users, right? So it's a tricky thing of like, I see this all the time. I think I posted about this on LinkedIn that I'm every product manager's worst nightmare, because I just like dismiss all of the tours. You pop in and they're like, welcome to the product. Here's this tour and this tour. And I'm like, no, 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 no. And I just want to hang around in the product until I figure it out. Like, I don't want any tutorials. I don't want any of that. Like, if your product is not intuitive enough, I just don't like. If I have to watch a tutorial, the product is too hard. And they get so, I can appreciate them being like, but we made you a tutorial. Why are you upset? And I'm like, just rename your buttons and then I don't need a 30-page tutorial. How about that? Right? So it's funny
Or
because
simplify your UI.
yeah, like, you can say that I'm doing it wrong because I'm not going through the onboarding, but how many people are actually willing to go through every step of the onboarding? So if you're finding that most people are dismissing your onboarding prompts, maybe maybe there's something wrong with the onboarding or the product, not something wrong with the user. Like,
Yes. It's like the whole phrase of like the customer is always right from like retail. It's
yeah,
the same thing with how people use products. The customer is right. You have to
yeah,
adapt to them.
yeah, yeah. And especially if you're seeing it at scale. Obviously, there's some people who they're just doing things completely wrong. Like, again, talking about Netflix, it's like Netflix and chill. It can't, Netflix doesn't also make the popcorn for me, right? Like they give me the movies, but they don't make the popcorn. If I'm like, why do I not have popcorn? Well, did you make popcorn? No, then that's why you don't have it. It's not Netflix's fault that you don't have your popcorn, right? But if I'm saying, well, why is it only showing me documentaries? And it's like, well, if you answered on the quiz that that's what you want, then like you can get mad at Netflix for being like, oh, here's your documentary, right?
The popcorn thing just brought up something funny in my mind. So with AI, I am finding that customers, we sell to marketers, right? So I'm selling to people who are definitely tech savvy, but not technical. And they have a lot of things they're trying to do. Doing more with less is the name of the game right now. But people think that AI is true black magic that can read your mind. And it is so funny. It's like your point of like, why isn't there popcorn? People are constantly being like, why isn't this done? Or like, why did it not know that this was a webinar camp, like follow up from this webinar? We're like, did you tell us in any way, shape, or form this was related to this webinar? And I had to start putting a slide in our onboarding deck. It is, what is tofu? What is tofu not? And the first thing it says and what we don't do is we do not read your mind because people just, I feel like it's magic. I push a button and just it knows what I want. We'll get there maybe.
We'll get there. Well, so it's funny because for a long time, people were like, I used AI to help me plan a date night. And I was like, okay, sure, I'll try that. No, it was a failure at that because humans are finicky, right? Like, and I tried to like refine my prompts of like, here's who me and my husband are, and here's the type of date night we like, and we just ate Mexican food last night, so please don't make a recommendation for a Mexican food restaurant, right? Like, and even still, then it's like, well, okay, do I also need to tell it we're going to eat Thai food tomorrow night? So like, but also I have Italian food in the fridge for like the next 3 days to eat. So maybe don't pick Mexican or Thai or Italian. Like, what am I? And like, my husband likes really spicy food and I'm wimpy about spices. Like, okay, by the time I have to tell it every deep, dark secret and preference of like my life and my husband and our life together, I just think about what I want for dinner and I'm ask my husband, right? Like, so it is a little funny because yeah, it's not AI's fault that it doesn't know what we ate for dinner last night unless I tell it, or what we're having for dinner tomorrow night unless I tell it, So it is, I agree with you. That is really funny that it's like, how did it not know that it was a webinar campaign? And you're like, did you tell it that?
And sometimes I also see people, so your example of like plan this date night and you're banging your head against a wall, trying to get it, and you're like, oh, I need to give it this context. Oh, I need to give it this. At some point, it's not worth it. It's better to just go and do something manually. And I see people spend so long trying to get AI to do something when the simplest solution is just move on. Just
Yeah.
that's not something that it's going to do right now. That's okay. There are other use cases.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's hard because I've had this debate as well that right now, particularly for the problems that I solve as more of like a team manager or senior level marketer, and I'm sure it's similar for you, my old school skills are still good. And
Yeah.
it's still faster for me to use my traditional skills and experience and expertise to solve a lot of the types of problems that I'm asked to solve. And so the question then becomes, at what point are my old school skills not going to be better? And it would be worth it for me to spend the time to train AI or prompt AI to do it for me. But there's a trade-off of like, there's the element of like, I don't know what I don't know. And so maybe I'm going to spend 5 hours trying to get AI to do something and it turns out it can't. And now I've actually wasted 5 hours. Or it can't, like maybe it could do it next year, but by the time it can do it, then I should just wait until next year when it'll only take me 20 minutes and now it can do this task forever, right? So there's these interesting trade-offs. And then the question of like, well, but you don't want to fall behind. And I'm like, oh, okay, but if it's going to be better in 6 months to where it cuts the time down from 5 to 8 hours down to only 10 minutes, then it's still better for me to spend an hour of my time 4 times and wait for AI to catch up and then do it, right? So it's not small to spend the time to play around and tinker and all of that kind of stuff. And I think as we think about broader adoption across our teams, giving them the buffer in the like the smaller timelines. I see this a lot where people are like, we're gonna just overhaul our whole process. And I'm like, well, what if you get halfway through and you figure out that it's actually not AI's fault, it's your process fault or the goal changes, right? So I'm actually more of a fan of trying to do things in smaller chunks and saying, let it try to write this blog for you. Okay, if it doesn't do a good job, then prompt it better. Like waste 2 hours now to fiddle with it. And then if it doesn't work, sure, trash it. But then try it again in a month, or try a different tool, or try a different model, or try a different type of prompt, right? Instead of trying to overhaul everything all at once and finding out that in fact your old school skills are still better, but AI might catch up in just a few months or in a year where you can do this stuff.
I like that mindset. And I think there's like the other bucket of that is also there are certain things that it might take you 5 hours to figure out something right now that's going to save you, that is good enough today, but it's going to save you 50 hours over the next month. And that also, you need the freedom and flexibility to experiment, but also people need to know that it's not something where you push a button and it's great out the gate. There is a level of training things, providing context, figuring out what works for you, figuring out the right models or tools. And I think some people get stuck on that too, of not spending the time either out of fear, out of frustration, out of lack of time. I don't know what that is, but that's also something where there is a lot of stuff that can be leveraged today. I'm curious, in your role, you were talking about some areas where you have certain things that the old school skills are better. Where have you found in your role AI is actually helpful and repeatably helpful?
Yeah. So I find it is helpful as a sparring partner. So, and like a summarization tool, particularly for things that have full context. So for example, Atlassian has our Rovo tool, and it includes search, chat, and agents. And so there's basically some summarization elements in there where you can, chat with it, you can give it a page and say, hey, summarize this. So pulling in things like the Loom transcript, which obviously AI does some of that. I think I had a super delightful experience the first time when basically Loom had released its AI capabilities, and I made a video and I went back to like go type in a summary, and it was like generating AI summary, generating AI title, like generating timestamps. And I was like, this is great. I don't have to do that. So I'm planning to use it on a project later today, actually, where I was like, you know what, I bet I could have AI do this. I'll just give it these pages, give it this transcript, and like see what it comes up with to put things together for me. I also used it to prep for a debate last year, and it was super helpful for research. Like I had an idea of what I wanted to pull, but I didn't quite know what the story was. And so I was basically like, go pull me all of these different stats and then cite where you got them, so I could obviously fact check it. And then I was able to start seeing kind of the story and the patterns emerge. But it would have taken me forever to go do all of that individual research myself, in large part because I only had a directional idea. I didn't actually have a proper hypothesis or a point that I was trying to prove. It was like, okay, I need to pull a bunch of stuff to kind of sort out my story. AI helped me with that. And then I also asked it to, basically I argued with myself and with it. So I got it to like poke holes in my argument. And then I asked it, the funnest question was like, what's an argument, if you're my opponent, that you wish I would make because it's so easy to defeat? And that was a fun one, because I was like, all right, let's play. So it was fun. Like I did a whole debate prep where I basically argued with myself, for myself, and against myself with AI. And that was really fun.
That's such a fun use case. It's kind of, do you know the concept of the term red teaming? It's more from the
Yeah.
government, but
It was like
it's
red
like
teaming. Yeah.
it's like red teaming yourself, of like poke all the holes and then tell me how to combat them. I think that's a fun one. I love using it to help my thought process. You also did my favorite question to ask in almost any situation. If I'm talking to a prospect, if I'm talking to a churn customer, if I'm talking to a candidate, is what questions did I not ask that I should have? That one just elicits so much useful information, and
Yeah.
it gives people this freedom to bring in all things I didn't even think about. And that's actually a fun one for AI too, of like,
Yeah.
what are all the questions that I didn't actually ask here that I should think about?
Yeah. Yeah. And I know there's for some of the folks on my team, like one of the gals on my team built a robo agent to do time zone conversions for her because she was trying to coordinate across Australia, Europe, and the US. And like she's on the East Coast of the US. So that Sydney and East Coast time zone situation is a
Ouch.
struggle. And so she was constantly trying to like use the calendar plugin and just Google it and whatever. And she was like, I bet you. And so she actually got Rovo to build her an agent, and it put it into this nice table and like made a whole recommendation for her. And she was like, oh, this is saving my life. Like this whole go figure out what time it is in London right now. I'm not doing that ever again.
That's a great one. The other one that I want to build is, most companies at this, do you guys do OKRs or some kind of
Yep.
goal
Yeah.
setting framework? So I think a lot of the data on whether you're going to hit your goals or not can be found in your calendar. And it's like a calendar and a few other places. It's your email inbox, especially Google. So it's email
Yeah.
inbox, calendar, and probably like Google Drive or probably some Atlassian products. I want something that goes and essentially takes in the doc that has all my OKRs, and then it hooks into my calendar, email, and things like that. And on a weekly basis, sends me a summary of how am I spending my time, and is it on the things directly related to the goals? And if not,
Mm.
reallocate. I feel like
Yeah.
that's one that's pretty applicable to any person in any company.
Yeah. I think again, if it, especially if it has like the transcript, so like a lot of us have enabled the Loom note taker for all of our meetings. And so it'll send you a recap and it'll like summarize the notes and whatever. And so if it could actually hook into like your one-on-ones, your weekly team meetings or something like that, and like
Yep.
pull the transcripts, that would be helpful versus just like the title of the meeting. Yeah, that's interesting. I
Yes.
do like this idea that since I mean, it is true, right? Like you spend time on the things you value. And so are you valuing the right things based on what's on your calendar? Yeah, that's interesting.
Yes. I have another question for you on, the book that you're writing is really around like humanity in AI. And I'm curious to get your take in both short term and long term of where do you think AI should replace the stuff that humans are doing, and where do you think it should not?
So this is an interesting thing. It's I don't cover this very much in the book because the book is really more around kind of that human-centered marketing approach. But I think there's some really interesting discussions around the value of doing the one-on-one level work yourself because it equips you to do the 201, 301, 401, 501 level work. And if you if you don't do that 101 level work, are you actually equipped to do the 501 level work in a decade, right? And so for the things that AI can't replace, conversations like this where it's like it's two humans, we chase some rabbits a little bit, we have seen each other's content or we do some research on each other and we kind of figure out like, all right, we got a good vibe, right? I get it. The AI avatars are going to be a thing and you can clone yourself and you can do, AI therapy. Like on one hand, I get it that might be possible, but there is something unique about two actual humans having a conversation. And I think that is particularly true. I think as AI becomes more prevalent, particularly in writing, what happens in person is going to be even more important. And so, you know, can you actually shake hands? Can you actually carry on the conversation over coffee? Are you fun to hang out with? Are you interesting to hang out with? That's the thing that is going to remain uniquely human. And I've seen conversations of like, oh, we're going to have AI BDRs and AI buying committees, and the AIs are just going to talk to each other. And I'm like, hear me out, man. I actually think that maybe we should have customer dinners with sales reps, right? Like maybe that is the thing that should stay with humans. But for a lot of the conversation about what AI should be doing, which is taking away a lot of those tedious or repetitive tasks, I think the problem is when you start getting too far away from that, you're not able to do the higher level tasks that only humans can do. So, perfect example, reporting. It makes no sense for a human to go to 5 different dashboards, take screenshots, put those on a page or put them in a deck, and then show up every month with their little deck that they pulled from 5 dashboards and basically summarize the screenshots. Like that is kind of dumb. Why are the humans doing that? That seems like a perfect task for AI. AI, here's all the dashboards. Go pull this in and then look at the data and give us highlights. And on one hand, that seems like a perfect task for AI. On the other hand, the point of looking at that data is not just to know what is showing in the dashboard. The point is to understand what's driving all of those numbers. What actions did the humans take, either as inputs or as outputs, to change those numbers? And if you don't actually have to muck around in the dashboard and fiddle with the filters and go to 5 different places, like again, even the question, why are there 5 different dashboards? Well, there's maybe something in the way you're thinking about attribution, or the way you're collecting data, or the channels that you're using, or scalability. How do you think about experimentation, right? Like, those are all the types of things that I think about as more of a senior leader that I can think about because I've been in the weeds with the dashboards for a long time. And so it's a really interesting thing. There's also this concept I come back to, and I'm not totally sure what the connection is yet, but feels like there's something. Banks, the way that they train tellers to figure out if they are getting counterfeit bills, they don't actually train them on counterfeits. They train them on the real thing. And they have them handle real money so much that when a counterfeit slips in, it looks different, it feels different, it smells different, like it doesn't behave the way it should. And it sticks out, not because they've learned what counterfeit is, but because they've learned what real is. And that's an area where I'm like, there is something there with AI. It's right now, it's in this vibe where we're trying to spot what's fake instead of we know what's real. And so when something is off, it sticks out, right? And so there's, I don't know, there's something in that. So when you ask, like, what should it definitely take? Oh, the 101 level work. I don't know, man. That stuff is foundational to being able to understand and troubleshoot at the, 401, 501 advanced levels, because you know what's real. And so when something's off, you know it.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I don't think I've ever heard anybody make that argument before, but that makes so much sense. That's a little bit of the argument I've heard, which I agree with, around removing SDRs. So AI SDRs kill the SDR. If you don't have people who are learning that, how are they going to learn all the rest of stuff? Like how are they going to get those foundational skills? Same thing with like junior marketing functions. There's a lot of stuff now that AI can kind of kill. It's like, to your point, if you haven't figured out how to do the basics, how are you ever going to do the upper, like more high level executive function stuff? So that's a good point. Food for thought. I had one other question for you. I know we're running out of time. So this seems to tie in both well to lifecycle marketing holistically, and then also the concept of human-centered marketing. So this is something I see so frequently, and I don't know if it's a problem with sales and marketing alignment or people fiefdom building or whatever, but people spend so much time focused on we need to do this, and like then this lead gets passed over here, and here's who gets credit, and here's who gets commission, and all that stuff, as opposed to thinking about what is the best journey for this person. What does the customer want? How do we serve the customer? We're all going to win if we do that. Why don't people do that? And obviously I haven't read your book, but I'm just curious to get your take on what does best practice look like in that?
So your point about why they don't, I think that's the core of the question, right? Are you using attribution to understand directionally if you're serving the right message to the right person at the right time in the right place to drive the right outcome? That's one way to approach attribution. It gives you the direction. It gives you the ability to choose. We all have limited resources, so understanding where to direct your resources does matter. And you need attribution. You need to understand what's working. The problem is most people use it, as you noted, to give credit, to give bonuses, to fire people, right? Like, so in this situation where we say, okay, let's take LinkedIn versus YouTube. Which one should we invest resources in, right? We only have one person. We only have enough dollars to fuel one of those channels. Which one should we do? Does that mean that if somebody, like the person who's currently managing LinkedIn, if the data says it should be YouTube, do you fire that person? Well, no wonder they're going to fight to say that LinkedIn is the right channel. You know what I mean? Versus
100%.
Understanding, right? Do we have people who are adaptable? Do we have the right skills mix overall? Is it possible to move someone in? Is it possible to incentivize everyone to work together, right? Like if I'm a sales rep, I've literally seen this in companies where if they can't take the work, like agencies are a perfect example, or lawyers, right? Anyone that bills for time. And so if they're at capacity and they can't take the work, instead of passing it over to another team, they'll just reject the deal, because they know if they give it to the other team and now suddenly the other team is performing better, they get more resources. And so instead of giving the business to the whole business, they're actually incentivized to just reject the client.
Yeah.
And when you see that, something like that happen, it blows your freaking mind. Like, why? Right? How did we get to a place where you would rather reject a client than give it to your teammate? And that is a whole problem. And this dovetails with the AI discussion as well, right? The reason this whole, oh, AI can do 50% of the job, so you need 50% fewer marketers. Okay, but then that means that the marketers that you need are unique. The thing that the humans can do is valued highly. And so the 40-hour work week was actually originally meant to be a worker protection. When that was established, it was actually meant to help and benefit the workers. It was not meant to be the minimum that people work. And so now if you're saying, let's say, obviously, I am not compensated hourly, but there's an assumption that I should be working at least 40 hours a week. If AI can suddenly do 20 hours of work, then should I now suddenly only be compensated for 20 hours? Well, of course I'm going to fight against AI, because you're telling me that you're going to take away half my salary.
Yes.
Is my landlord going to reduce my rent by half because my salary is reduced by half? Right? Like the underlying fear, the issue is not, oh, we shouldn't measure anything, or, oh, the core issue is people's livelihoods, their ability to feed their families or get a job, right? Like, you have to think about all of that. And I think that's a lot of these discussions just focus on, like, well, we have to know where to put our ad dollars. And it's like, okay, if you get at the heart of it, what you're talking about with this attribution credit is whether or not somebody gets paid. Now, fair enough, if you're bad at your job, that's a separate conversation. But upskilling, reskilling, shifting capacity, dollars, prioritization, like that's a very different conversation than give credit to fire people or give somebody a bonus, right? So I know that doesn't totally answer your question in terms of like, what's the best practice? And it's like, well, the best practice is remember that there's humans making these decisions and experiencing the consequences of these decisions. That'll tell you right there why the behavior goes in one direction or another.
You articulated very well my thesis in life in general, which is everything is incentive alignment. Everything comes down to incentive alignment. And if you can understand that and how to get what you're looking for while aligning incentives with all parties, things are easy. But most people forget that that is an important piece. This has been so fun. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm really excited to read your book. Can't wait to see it. And excited. We'll have to do round 2 again. I feel like we could probably jam for another hour.
Oh yeah. We'll definitely chat again.
Amazing. Well, thank you for coming on, Ashley. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.